Okay, last minute live. Had no plans for training today, had some time, so I've got like an hour. So if you're on, ask questions. I've got no plans in terms of training. I'm just going to warm up. I can demo some stuff, answer some questions. First handstand of the day, see how that's feeling. Not too bad. The hamstrings, forward fold. Ooh. Yeah, wrist needs a bit more for planchy stuff, but so shout out if you have any questions and we can get the ball rolling. What you guys training? Anything anything you're stuck with? How to consistently handstand kick up. Also, if my handstand isn't too good, how can I still work on the handstand push up? I'm lacking in both strength and balance. I can do 3 to 4 good back to wall handstand push ups, but can't do one freestanding handstand. Yes, you just got to ride the edge. Obviously, balance needs to be priority. So the cool thing with handstand balance work is that you can train it all the time. So as long as you've got if you've already got conditioning in the wrists and stuff, then there shouldn't be anything really holding you back in terms of consistency. So constantly train your handstand balance as part of your warm up and your superset when you're doing your handstand push up work. So if you're training like Pike push ups, chest to wall handstand push ups, back to wall handstand push ups, that type of variation, also add a balance component in there with those repetitions. So for the separate balance work, what I always preach is that back to wall, chest to wall, over balance, under balance. So kicking up to the wall, making the body one segment, using the fingers to push nice and tall off the wall, and then coming back to the wall again. So get super strong, consistent at that, being able to do that for repetitions, and then doing the same in the under balance. You've probably seen me do these already, and it is literally practicing this every day, practicing that under balance drill, pulling it off using the shoulders. And then when you're doing your handstand push-up work, ride the edge of your balance while you're doing it. So if you're doing back to wall or chest to wall, add in a balance at the start and the finish of each, ideally repetition, if not the end of each set. So if I'm doing back to wall handstand push-ups, I might kick up to the wall, see if I can balance there for a second, ride that. As soon as you lose balance, then do your handstand push-up repetitions, and then add another balance to the top. And then over time, you can start to balance on the way down, and then just use the wall as you need to. So that can be done back to wall, chest to wall. So just more handstand balance work. Most people that can't balance well enough just haven't put the time in, enough consistency. So some of it can be boring, but add it in like that to the handstand push-up work, and it's not so bad. Handstand head position. So real simple. Pick something, have something to look down to. So if I use my phone, and then I'm just going to put my phone on the floor there. So I'm going to constantly look down at my phone. There, have my hands, so they're just slightly behind the focal point. So there, this is for most beginners, looking down that point all the time. And notice when I kick up, see how it stays the same. So for me, that's probably a little bit too far away, so I then move it back a little bit. But I have the same focal point before I kick, as I kick, and then in the handstand. And it's the same all the time. And you can fine tune that. What we don't want to be doing is changing the head position as we kick, because that's going to change the base dramatically where you're at. So I want to have a strong, consistent focal point, which will control the head position. Cool. Good to see you. Thanks for your support, buddy. I took a week-ish break from handstands, and now it's banana again. Is it just shoulder mobility? Yeah, shoulder mobility, but also strength. So don't prioritize balance at the moment. Don't worry too much about having a banana handstand. That's just part of learning the process. As you get up to like 20, 30 second consistent handstand, holds, then I'd recommend you start playing with your handstand balance. But until that point, I would just use strength to help you with your balance. So it's much easier for me to kick up to a banana-like handstand. So like this, head and shoulders forwards, feet backwards. That's a really relaxed, easy kick up. But if I try and snap to this, you can see like that's way more delicate. It's like standing like this. I'm on the edge of my balance all the time. So making the position a little bit more relaxed will give you more consistency, better catch, and a longer balance time. And then over time, you can think about straightening the handstand. But don't worry about that while you're learning to balance. It'll come with time. Also, do you turn your biceps forward when handstand push-up so your elbows go straight backward? I saw that somewhere else because I naturally flare a bit. Yeah, just think of your elbow position, trying to keep the elbows in a little bit. It's like a bit more like a overhead press. So if I'm in that position, I want to press on above my head, especially in this bottom position. I need to have my elbows underneath. If I flare like this, look, it doesn't, like it's like bringing the knees in on a squat. It like internally rotates the shoulder, doesn't look very good. But if I do this, see how much stronger that looks? That's going to be better for your position. But so keeping the elbow in when you do it does help. Some of that will just be creating a triangle. So your head and shoulders going forwards of your hands as you come down. But if you find you're flaring a lot, just go back to a slightly easier variation and you'll probably find that you can hold on to the position. Hi, Paul. I was wondering if a deadlift is transferable to calisthenics. Does strengthening the spinal erectors can help with presses, strong glutes, maybe help the hip extension for back bends? Yes, definitely. I would do deadlifts. That's like my number one strength exercise that I keep. It's beneficial for hip opening, closing. Some of it's a bit reversed. So it's like 180 degrees out of phase in terms of the muscles because when you're upside down. So I can do a deadlift. I was actually doing deadlifts yesterday. I still got my bar set up there. But if I do a deadlift like this, and I think, okay, I'm going to use my posterior chain to open the hip, that's exactly what we need to happen when I'm upside down in this position and I open up that way. So exactly the same. I'm opening up like I'm opening up there. So it's good to train that, but it's also just good for hip extension, training that bend pattern. It can be very intense as well, so you can go nice and heavy with it. So the other qualities are with the body weight strength and the calisthenics and stuff, we can tend to not do enough hip extension strengthening. So the deadlift is a fantastic exercise where it's just like one big bang exercise that does so much. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it. Whether it directly carries over to calisthenic exercises in terms of helping you for the skill of the movement, it's questionable, but there's so much benefit with it that I would do it at least once every 2 to 3 weeks, a little bit more if it's a weak spot. I'll do it like once, maybe twice a month at maximum, but I'm already strong in that pattern, so I'm just maintaining. Is gym good for training the strength part of the handstand push-up? It depends. If you're weak in the position, like adding some overhead pressing in is going to be beneficial. It is open chain where handstand push-up is closed chain, so the skill of it is slightly off. But in terms of that push strength, it's going to be the same. So what I mean by the open closed chain is if I do a overhead press with a dumbbell or barbell and push up, that's open chain because my hands are moving. But if I do a handstand push-up, my body moves, my hands stay in the same position. So that's what we call closed chain. So a push-up, handstand push-ups, closed chain. Chin-ups, closed chain because you're pulling yourself to the bar. A lat pull-down is open chain. Overhead press is open chain. So yes, it does carry over, but I would still be doing your skill work for your handstand push-ups. I don't program that much of overhead pressing for my clients. Unless I find that there's a massive gap in it and they're not making progress with the handstand push-up variations. Majority of the guys I've got and girls who have got to do handstand push-ups have used standard Pike push-ups, chest to wall, back to wall, handstand push-up variations, eccentrics, and partial range. What exercise do you recommend for an athlete who can do straddle and full planche and want to improve it with resistance band? If you can already do a straddle and full planche, what exercise do you recommend for an athlete who can? So you can already do a straddle and a full planche. I wouldn't be using bands hardly at all. I'd be then working planche presses. Now you could use a band for planche presses, but if you can already do a full planche, I'm guessing you can already do easier variations of planche presses. So I would just do planche press variations. And the only reason I'd use a band is to increase a bit of time if your holds are very short. But I wouldn't do much band training at all if you're at that level. I would keep to the handstand push-up progressions as much as you can for the skill element, because what you also don't want to do if you pick something like a handstand push-up or any of the skills, we want to try and keep it as close to the real thing as possible with the least amount of exercises. You don't want to be going, I'm training planche and I've got 15 exercises that are going to help me with my planche. Better off doing 2 exercises that help you with your planche, or 1 even, and just hit that multiple times. And then as soon as you feel like it's not helping you anymore, then you mix it up a little bit. But if you've got 10 or 15 different exercises for the one thing, you're going to sort of get lost and probably not be able to concentrate enough on one thing to make progress. My handstand is stuck at 20 to 30 seconds for a month. So I would just try and either let your body relax a little bit more, so go into not such a good position. I would train tuck handstand, straddle handstand, because if you can do 20 to 30 seconds, I'd start filling up the other components. So tuck handstand, straddle handstand, straight handstand. I would do strength work with planche press type movements, handstand push-ups, so bent arm work, and also like skin the cat lever work around your handstand balance, and they will feed into it and should help you fill some of the gaps. You shouldn't really get stuck at a 20, 30 second hold if it's consistent at 20, 30 seconds, because every time you kick up and hold, you're getting that time under tension. So you should naturally keep increasing. So there's something that's off there. So I would definitely throw a few other things at it and just try and relax your position. Maybe you're not as consistent as you think you are in terms of your holds. If you've got a 20 to 30 second max hold and you can only do it once, but it takes you 20 kick ups to get it, then you don't have a 20 to 30 second consistent hold. You probably have a 5 to 10 second consistent hold. So it's trying to work out exactly where you are and then try and fill the gaps with other things, like the tuck and the straddle is a great way of doing it, especially tuck work. How to maintain hollow body during handstand. That's another point. If you're stuck at 20 to 30 seconds, don't be worrying about doing a hollow body hold in a handstand. It should just be like when I do a handstand, I'm not a hollow body. So my eyes, a hollow body hold like a gymnast does is arching the body on the floor like a dish position. So look at my handstand position. So I'm going to use no core when I'm holding this handstand. I'm just going to stack. So I'm not doing a hollow body hold. Look, it's a straight handstand. I'm not hollowing in any way at all. I'm just reaching up tall. It's exactly the same as when I stand. I'm not hollowing. I'm not turning my abs or my glutes on, but my posture's pretty good. So it's just about getting a bit taller. So if you're bracing yourself, you're bracing myself like this is way harder to stand up and walk and move. So that could be your thing that's holding you back on your handstand, is you're actually turning your core on too much. We should only need our core if we start to fall out of position. So when you start to fall out of position and you pull yourself back to your middle of your balance, that's where you might need to switch your core on. But it should really not even be a conscious activation of your core. It should just be, okay, I'm pulling myself back using my fingers, or I'm using my shoulders to correct the overbalance or underbalance. Currently dealing with a shoulder injury. Have you dealt with injuries in the past in your calisthenics, and how have you handled getting back? 100%. So I've had left shoulder issues or niggles for a long time. It's more or less good now, but I don't push it too much. And that's why my right one-arm handstand is really good and my left one-arm handstand is terrible. So I hurt that trying to do backflips when I shouldn't have been doing backflips. So basically I work around the injury or the discomfort. So if I've got a bad wrist and I can't handstand, if I can't do it on P-bars or something else, I'll focus on working on planches, or no, not play, you wouldn't be able to do planches, like a different upper body mobility exercise, or I might be working on my splits or my lower body mobility, or pick like a pistol squat or a dragon squat or something while you're doing some sort of rehab type movement. And it might just mean you're backing off on your exercises and going back to a really much easier level, or it might be that you're completely stopping the calisthenics training and you're just doing some sort of rehab type movement. Obviously, it depends on the injury. A common one is like elbow pain, wrist pain, and forearm pain when doing muscle ups, false grip work, lots of pulling, one arm chin work, plus doing handstand push ups and presses and all that sort of thing, just because there's so much push and pull type stress across the arms. The elbows tend to really flare up, the wrists will flare up, the forearm will flare up. So that's a really common one where you just have to decrease the intensity. Obviously, there's prehab and rehab and stuff that you can do, but most of the time it's more trying to deal with the intensity level of each of those things, and maybe just going, okay, I'm going to work muscle ups only for a while, and I'm going to back off on the handstand push-ups or whatever the other movement is, and just do more maintenance level on the other work and concentrate on one thing. But obviously, injuries is something we all have to deal with, but there's different levels of each. And so it depends on the injury, but I'd use it as an opportunity to work the other parts, because we always have weak bits that we miss out on. Like, most people can increase their flexibility, and it will help them improve everything. And that's a good time to work on your flexibility, especially like things like hips and thoracic and things like that, if you've got a bad shoulder. Now, if you've got a bad shoulder, opening up the thoracic mobility, so opening the chest up more, is going to help. So if I'm stuck in my shoulder and my back looks like this, I can't now put my arms above my head, and that's going to hurt my shoulder by trying to improve there. But if I open my spine up, see, my hand increases and the range of motion gets better, but I haven't changed my shoulder. So sort of targeting the area that's in pain by opening up the rest of the body to help it is a really good way of doing it. I've got a couple of videos just on those. Hi, Paul, can you describe the position of the shoulders blade in the handstand? Is it the same for all inversion moves like handstand, push up, crow? It is slightly different. So like you're pushing. So try not to think too much about isolating certain body parts. You can get confused by this. It's a bit like trying to sort the pelvis out when you're trying to do different things. If you think more of the skill of the movement. So when we do a handstand, we're elevating, so we're pushing. So see, I've got a gap here. When I do a handstand, I don't want to have too much of a gap there. So I want to push up as high as I can. So we're elevating the scapula, or pushing up in the air. Now, when we come down into that movement, the shoulder blade is going to change position depending on what our arm does and where our shoulder is relevant to the rib cage. So this is all going to change things, and it's a constantly moving thing. You just want to feel that you're not collapsing in any way. A good example is learning how to go from handstand to planche, because when I'm in planche, I'm protracting and pushing in this position. It's a very different scapular position than elevation when I'm in a handstand. So if I'm in a handstand here, elevating and pushing up, if I want to come down slowly and go into a planche, I need to now go into whoa, that went too fast. Now I'll go into protraction and push up. So I need to change that shoulder position as I go through it, and trying to understand that and think about what's happening in the shoulder and try and control it from a articulation point of view or isolation point of view is probably the wrong way to go, because you'll probably collapse through the movement. Or if we just think about pushing really strong as we come down, it will set the shoulder in the right position, and you'll probably have more luck that way. I always enjoy it when I have a doctor or a chiro or a physio or someone who knows anatomy really well in a class where I'm coaching them, because they have they understand the body better than me, but I understand the skill progressions better than them. And it's an interesting conversation, and they sort of have to let go of their thinking about the positions and the body parts so much, and more about the skill. So I hope that helps. Good night, Paul. Greetings from Colombia. Currently doing heel pull and toe pulls every day. Do you recommend training pancakes every day? I would definitely visit pancakes every day. It's one of those movements that I literally couldn't sit in. So when I started doing this style of training at 37, my straddle pancake looked like this, or if not worse. There's some photos on my website. So I couldn't sit in that position. So the only way I could do that and improve it, or the quickest way, was yes, use exercises. So every day I was working like straddle good mornings and making this deeper. It still needs a bit of a warm up now, but then I can get this is completely cold. I can get down to the floor. But so I opened and closed the position with stretching in between my handstands. So whenever I've done handstands, I've done straddle good mornings. I hung out in this position. I've done standing straddle good mornings. I lengthened the hamstrings every day with like Jefferson curls and stuff, but I wasn't too intense. And then the other thing I'd done was I added in sitting in the position. So when I played with the kids, when I eat my dinner, when I watch TV, when I play PlayStation, when I work on my laptop, I sit in this position. And then day to day, I revisit the position on a less intense position. So I'll raise the hips up with some cushions underneath my butt and just stay there for like 20, 30 minutes minimum per day, just throughout the day when I'm not training. That would be my biggest recommendation for all the mobility work, is visit the positions daily. But just don't be too intense. Obviously, you can't smash it every day because your body's going to hate it and it's going to stop you from going there, and you're more likely to get injured. Does moving into L handstand shift weight towards overbalance? Because sometimes if I undershoot, I move the legs into an L handstand and it kind of moves me into overbalance, saves the handstand. Yeah, you'll have that seesaw type movement that will happen. So you got to think that if you're handstanding here and your legs start going this way, your shoulders need to go past your base. So something needs to go past your base. Now I can do that with my hips. So I can take my legs one way, I can take my hips in the opposite direction. So you always need something on one side to balance out what's on the other side. Now you can stick your feet in one direction, you can stick your hips in one direction, you can stick your shoulders forwards, you can bend your arms, that takes the shoulders forwards and the head comes down. So the height and how much something sticks forwards will help you rebalance towards overbalance and underbalance. However, what you've got to be careful of is if you try and use the hips and the legs too much, is you'll be chasing yourself all the time. So you'll go one direction and then you'll have to go the other direction, and it'll be like a really whippy type movement, like when you're drunk and you're trying to balance with your head and your shoulders and you just stumble about. But if we plant and have most of the work happening in the hands, elbows, and shoulders, your balance and control is going to be way more consistent and way more stronger. L handstands in body straight and legs at 90 degrees. Yeah, that's. Hi, Paul. In general, how much stronger are we doing negative eccentric motion versus concentric? A lot stronger. Apparently, if you look at studies and stuff on it, females have a different percentage than males, which is interesting. But basically, you're stronger in an eccentric than a concentric. But what you need to think about in terms of skill is that it depends on your ability to do the skill correctly is going to make the eccentric or the concentric harder or easier. So something like a handstand push up, if we hold balance all the way down and I keep the right amount of weight in front of me. So if I do a handstand push up eccentric, so if I come down now, this is much easier. If I keep the right weight with my feet backwards and my head and shoulders forwards, that's much easier than going back up. But when I go back up, if I do this and shift my feet over, I don't know if you saw that, I went like this with my body. So I moved my legs over. I shifted into overbalance, which helped me out of the concentric. And in some ways, the eccentric then, turn the background, the eccentric then was probably about the same as the concentric in terms of difficulty level, because I cheated a bit on the concentric by body positioning. So that's why we need to be a little bit clever and careful with saying, eccentrics, concentrics, time under tension, tempo, all of those things are going to have a big effect on it. So you need to be thinking about training the skill and getting the right movement for you to fill your gaps in the skill and your understanding of it. So it gets a bit confused. It's a bit like knowing the anatomy really well, knowing what muscles and stuff you should be firing, but you can't do the skill. But the person that has no idea what muscles you're talking about, but has just practiced really good quality repetitions and skill, they'll be able to do more handstand push-ups than the person that just knows the anatomy. So it's a bit like that. But I can do deep handstand push-ups, a negative 90-degree push-up, but every time I try 90, I get to the bent arm handstand position and feel stuck. I can't finish the last part. Any tips? I would elevate the hands if you're not doing that. So weight plates work really well, the bumper plates, because you're nice and confident because you still could be quite close to the floor, or the IKEA steps. I've got a couple of videos on that where I show how to scoop the head and shoulders down underneath. And you've got to try and use that momentum to take you up. What a lot of people will do is they'll push up and they'll get stuck in like the deficit handstand push-up position because they've moved so slow and they're so deep in the handstand push-up and they've lost all that like contract relax type. What am I trying to say? When you go like you go down on the handstand push-up and back up, that change in direction. If you do it as one movement and keep the tempo good, it's nice and easy. But when you do it in a 90-degree handstand push-up, you'll pull and you'll run out of that stretch reflex that you get. And you just have to pull up from like a dead press or push up from a dead press, and it's really challenging. The last video I put up on training push day, where I do a stool to press with a 90-degree handstand push up, I was doing the same thing. I was getting stuck in that bottom position. I got a couple of reps where I just had to really grind out the push, but it was way harder than my normal 90-degree handstand push-ups because I was getting stuck in that bottom position with no energy to help me out or no momentum. So I would use that hands elevated up, go into a straddle position or like a semi-tuck position, and then just get used to scooping yourself up out of the position. And then once that becomes easier, start to clean it up and make it stricter and slowly decrease the amount of height that your hands are raised up. Doing the handstand with hands facing straight forwards, unlike the slightly outward turning I think you've mentioned, does turning it outward increase strength but make it a bit harder to balance. I would always go like index finger forwards for my handstand balance. And then if I'm doing press and handstand push up, I would turn out more than that. I definitely wouldn't go like middle finger straight up. I would always balance with my index finger straight up. That's what I prefer. But you just got to play around with what you find works best, and also get the distance apart correct for you, because a lot of people try and go too narrow with their handstand, and they'll struggle because they'll see a hand balancer will have like, I'll have my hands like this close, especially if I'm doing one arm work, I have my hands that close because it's much easier to go into one arm. So you'll see someone who's really good at handstands have their hands like there, but mobility wise and balance wise, it's probably easier to have your hands there. So there's quite a difference between that and that. So explore what works best for you. How to manage having hypermobile joints, wrists, shoulders, hyperextended arms, and bendy back. I know someone with this issue, and it's hard to remain stable in the handstand. They move like spaghetti. In a lot of ways, it's very beneficial to have that type of mobility. You'll see a lot of the top hand balancers will be hypermobile. Their elbows will go right into the middle. It just means whatever range of motion that your body has, you need to condition that range of motion. So the worst thing you can do with someone like that is get them to balance with their arms slightly bent because they're avoiding going into hyperextension. What I would do is I'd back off on the level of the exercise and train at easier level exercises, so less intense, but at full range of motion. So extending and pushing as hard as they can in that position, but making sure that their arms is straight, and they might even look like they're hyperextended, and condition their body like that. Over time, it will take a little bit longer. It's like someone who can lay, like that person can probably lay totally flat in a straddle pancake, but then they can't lift themselves out. So it's another good example is the person that can lay flat easily in this position. So if they're hypermobile, they can just lay flat there. You often find they can't get out unless they use their hands. They have to push their hands onto the floor and they walk their hands back down again. So with that person, I'd be working a smaller range of motion and getting their hips to do the work. So they're conditioning that range, and then slowly make it bigger and bigger until they can go up and down with their arms above their head, and even holding a small weight or something and going up and down with their body extended. But they're going to have to back off to much easier progressions to condition it. But once they can do it and they've conditioned that range of motion, they'll have the best of both worlds. They'll be hypermobile, and they'll be conditioned through that range of motion so they can use whatever variation they need. And it's actually a really good thing. So there's pros and cons for being hypermobile and hyper tight or non-mobile. So if you're someone like myself who has to really fight to get for mobility, and if I don't try and keep up, like on a daily basis, don't visit positions, I tighten up so fast. But what's meant is that when I learned my range of motion, I slowly increased my strength through that range of motion. So I got strong in the range that I had. Where someone who has super flexible, they've already got the range, and then it takes them longer to fill all of that range with strength. But it can be done, and it's really useful. Is keeping my lower body completely stable and still better for handstand balance, and trying to use the lower body to help you balance. I'm assuming you mean in the handstand. So when your legs and your hips, when you're first learning, you'll have to keep everything really still and just focus on the hands and the shoulders doing everything. But once you get very good at your handstand balance using the base, it basically doesn't matter what the legs are doing. You can wave your legs around all over the place. So if I do a handstand, I can wave my legs around all over the place. It's not affecting my balance because my head and my shoulders are doing all my balance work. But what we don't want to do is have your legs and your hips and everything trying to balance you, because you'll just throw yourself all over the place. So the beginner to start with is much better off to make their body more rigid and hold there, not in a dead straight line, but just whatever position they find comfortable, and then just focus on the base doing the balance work. Every time I do chest to wall drills with toe pulls, I keep falling when I try to push vertically. Being in too much overbalance and losing control. I'm stuck at 5-second chest to wall with toe pulls. So just video yourself from the side and check whether you're using your hips too much. A lot of people that go over all the time are pulling off the wall with their hips, not their shoulders. So you want the shoulders to be leading the way, not the hips. If the hips are leading the way, you'll feel top heavy and it will be like you're on the edge of falling all the time. So I definitely video from the side and slow the movement down and try and lead with the shoulders more. That's often the case. I can finally do straddle press to handstand thanks to you. Thank you so much from South Korea. That's awesome. Fantastic. My part's the easy bit. Giving the information out is the easy bit. The consistent training and actually doing the work is the hard bit. So that's fantastic. Well done. What do you think is the best way to enter planche position? Leaning into it, extending from tuck out, or lowering into it from handstand? I would play with all of them, but the main thing we need to be focusing on with the planche is protraction and pushing up. So you'll see a lot of people, especially when they're learning like easier positions. Tuck planche is not easy, but it's an easier progression compared to the harder ones with planche. But you'll see a lot of people doing the tuck, advanced tuck, even like some start level like frog straddle positions, and they'll have way too much forward lean and not enough protraction. So trying to go whatever entry to the planche gives you more of an up movement is I think is the best way of doing it. So like learning from this position. So when I'm going into a planche, if I go into a tuck here and then push up, and go into it like that, so my energy is going that way and I'm pushing up, is way easier than going here and then trying to bring myself into the position, because it just means that I'm gonna fire myself that way and my head and shoulders are going to go forwards and down instead of protracting up into a push position. So I prefer that. I really enjoy it when you're at a bit better level, enjoying like going in from a L-sit position and then coming up into planche. I really like doing that. I've got some of my better holds coming out of an L-sit into planche, but I think you get that same thing as you scoop around and up into protraction. But in terms of fun, I much prefer doing handstand to planche. But you have to sort the scapular out. It's a little bit tricky going from the elevation to the protraction like I was demoing earlier. Guys, let me just have a drink a second. I'll let you see Rosie. Rosie. Okay. Just following up on the eccentric versus concentric example, can a concentric be unlocked just from eccentric training? E.g., approximately how many reps, seconds on an eccentric handstand push-up equals 1? It's impossible to say, like I was saying, because someone might have a really good balance. So that's going to affect how they can control their eccentric and concentric. In a program, I would always put in something for the concentric, but the eccentric will normally give you the availability of a full range of motion. So like a handstand push-up, you might have someone that can go handstand slowly all the way down to the eccentric, touch the head. And a rule of thumb is to be able to do 30 seconds time under tension should equal 1 concentric repetition. So if you can do a handstand slowly lower down to your forehead touches the floor, and that lasts 30 seconds, that should be equal to 1 concentric rep. I think that was Ido that told me that. The same with a chin up. If you hold chin against the chest against the bar, slowly go down at the same tempo for 30 seconds, it should be equivalent to a concentric repetition. However, I would always do, for doing the eccentric handstand push-ups, I'd always do some concentric work, whether it's pike push-ups, whether it's Croda handstand partial range. But the cool thing is you can tick off that you're going through that full range of motion by the eccentric, because you cover the full range, and then you can just work the concentric, which is normally harder, with the other exercises that can be a bit more fun as well. So I would always put 2 in a program. I'd never just train with eccentrics. But I think eccentrics are an amazing way of training. Do you feel like straight arm strength is actually practically in everyday life? I feel most of the time in real life, when I use my arms, they are at least somewhat bent. Yeah, we definitely function way more in bent arm. But things like getting up off the floor, you always use straight arms, so you'll have a lot of support positions will be straight. So it will be around. It's just harder to see it. Like a lot of our resting positions are in a straight arm position. Like if I get up off the floor now, my right arm is straight, but I'll push up to that straight position. So it's more static support positions. Hanging will be, a good example of being straight. We just, most people don't hang enough. But I think it's very beneficial. Like it opens up a whole new world when you start specifically training straight arm strength. Thank you for making such videos. How to do a pike press handstand. Pike press handstand is the same as all the press handstand variations. If we do I'm just going to have to close the garage a minute. It's raining. There, Rosie. Sit down. Okay, hopefully that isn't too dark. Let me just stick the lights on. It's spring in Australia at the moment, but but we're still getting lots of rain at the moment, which is not great. Okay, it might look a bit funny, but I'm back. What was I saying? Okay, pike press handstand. Eccentrics is key. Having mobility with a pike press is really important. So slow eccentrics for a full range of motion. So if I was going to do now, or if I have a client come to me and they want to learn a pike press handstand and they can do a handstand, I ask them to see a slow eccentric. So that gives us a lot of information. So if they can hold a handstand and then they come down, they stick their hips backwards, keep the shoulders open, and go as slow as possible through that until tip toes touch the floor. Then it shows me what they need to work on. If they fall through that range of motion, then we're going to have to go back to wall, or we're going to have to support them in some way and slow down the eccentric. If we find that they can't do that, we might have to go to an easier variation of the pike push up. So pike push up, pike press, or the easier version of the press handstand, and go to like a tuck or a straddle press and train that first. If they can do a slow eccentric, I would add that in, whether it's chest back to wall or like I just demonstrated the freestanding version. And then I would do partial range. So with their feet normally on something, lifting up from a pike press up into handstand. So learning to control coming out of the 7 handstand back to a straight handstand is really tricky. So practicing that with partial range up, so you're working the concentric component. Then it's nice and simple. You just got 2 exercises. You've got your partial range up, and then you've got your eccentric down. But obviously, you've got to make sure that the person has a strong tuck handstand, ideally a 7 handstand, and then they can have the good flexibility. If they can normally do a pike, if they can do a deep tuck handstand and they can get into a 7 handstand, then their flexibility is normally okay as well. But if it isn't, then we need to work on those components or anything else that's missing. So obviously it's really hard to say unless you assess the person. So normally I do that assessment first. Some tips on L-sit to crow. L-sit to crow, I would just go down through the eccentric with your hands raised up. That will show whether you can do that. You need to make sure that you have a crow, you need to make sure you have an L-sit, and then you can do the transition between them. So you can go like something like the IKEA steps work really well because they're nice and stable when you can play with them. They're not too high for a crow position. So you can go in the crow position there, make sure you have that, make sure you have the L-sit, and then do the eccentric. So you would go crow through to your L, and then you can start to work on going back in the other direction. So that's a good assessment. Check you've got the 3 components. Do you have the crow? Do you have the L-sit? And do you have the slow transition eccentric first? And if you do, then you can start to work partial range concentrics. If you don't and don't understand that seesaw between the hips, the legs and the shoulders turning round, then you'll need to work things like L-sit to shoulder stand, which is easier than L-sit to crow. And then depending on which variation you want to do, if you're doing it for like yoga, where you won't have IKEA steps, you could then go to like yoga blocks underneath your hands. So you've still got a bit of clearance. And then eventually you can go to floor. You just need to cross your legs or work out how you get your legs through between your hands and between the floor and you. We've caught up, guys. I've answered all the questions, I think, unless I've missed any. Paul, how to fix back arch in a handstand. So if you've got a lot of extension in your handstand, a simple way is to, every time you're balancing, is to slowly push up a little bit taller. So think, if I stand with bad posture, all I've got to do is imagine being someone's pulling me up by my hair, if I have any hair, to the taller position. So if you're standing here with bad posture like this, if I just think about getting taller and just push up in that direction, then it makes me taller. The risk is when we're doing a handstand is if we're in this position, so we've got an arch, so you'll do this and you'll fire back in the opposite direction. So we don't want that side-to-side type movement. So if I've got an archy handstand position, so if I'm like this, I don't want to be thinking about this because that will just fire me out. So I'm not throwing myself in sideways type movements. I want to think about going from this position, and all I'm going to do is get taller. So I'm going to extend my feet up. I'm going to start to straighten my arms and push away, and then just keep pushing taller and taller in that position. So it's about lengthening up while you're holding balance. Now, what you might find is you might not have the mobility. So if you don't have the mobility, we need to hang, we need to increase the thoracic extension, we need to understand the mobility in the hips and work on those things. Or it could be, which is very common, is that your handstand balance isn't strong enough to hold a straight handstand. And if your handstand balance isn't strong enough, what your body does is it's using strength to hold the balance. So then your shoulders will come forwards, your head will be looking down towards the floor, you'll open the chest up more, And that's why you can balance. And that banana position really helps that. That's why a lot of people can balance very well in a scorpion position, because their flexibility allows it, but their balance isn't good enough to hold a straight handstand, because they need to have that strength component, or that more easier position, if you like, to balance. So increasing your control in heel pulls, toe pulls, just getting better at freestanding handstand over time will make you have a straighter and straighter handstand. Thanks for your answer. It makes sense to me. Looking forward to your next video. Awesome, Nick. Thank you. How do you balance a Mexican handstand? So what exactly the same as in a straight handstand? You need to have equal weight on both sides, or equal energy, depends what you want to call it. So when you open your shoulders up in a Mexican, your legs and hips are going to go in the opposite direction. So my Mexican is not amazing, especially without warming up to it. So I can't just take my shoulders this way, because it will bring me back in that direction. So if I take my shoulders this way, I also have to take my hips and my legs in the opposite direction. So I might just go from here and then open out, and then I come back in. So I'm just opening a little bit. Now I could bend the knees first and then extend away like that. But you just want to go really, really slowly. I've got a couple of videos on it where I use a box. So I put a box up against the wall, kick over, put your feet onto the wall, put your feet down onto the box, then open the shoulders and chest and back in that direction, and lift the toes off, and then you can just hover in that position. That's a really nice way of doing it, because if you try the freestanding version, more than likely you'll keep falling over and it just becomes annoying and you don't get enough time in the position. Okay, we're up to date again. Anything else before I disappear? How long have we been on? 45 minutes. I penciled in an hour for this one, so I can stay on if there's more questions. I know it was a ad hoc one. Let's just check my messages. Okay. Hey, Paul, for the one-arm handstand, is it better to start training straight body and both legs together, or start with straddle and then legs together? I would mainly focus on straddle. Most people will get their first one-arm handstand in a straddle position. It's just way easier to balance, basically, in that position, because you can flag over to one side and it brings the leg down. The straight position can feel like it's easier until you start lifting the hand. As soon as you start to lift the hand, it's much harder. So you'll see people that have very good straddle flexibility will normally get a one-arm handstand much quicker than someone that has not so good straddle flexibility. So anyone that's got over splits, they'll have a very strong one-arm handstand, and even to the point where I've seen people that have amazing straddle one-arm handstands, but literally can't do a couple of seconds in a straight position. It's so much harder. So I would definitely focus on 99% of your training in a straddle one-arm handstand. And it's one of those things that when I'm the people that I'm teaching to do one-arm handstands never believe me, because they when you're practicing with fingertips still, the straight position feels so much easier than a straddle. But as soon as you start to lift, it all makes sense. How to make a balance is that balance? How to make a balance in a handstand? Is that what you mean? Just let me know if that's what you mean, how to balance in a handstand. I'm not sure what that is. Is overbalance strength 100% based on hand strength? Yeah, body positioning. Because you could go like it's not. Yeah, it's body positioning more, because it's not like having stronger hands is going to help. But the reason we don't, if you think about it, like what's the percentage of overbalance and underbalance? I'd reckon that underbalance in a handstand is probably 70 or 80% of the work, and 20 to 30% is overbalance. We don't spend any time in overbalance. So, because if you think about it on your feet, you're constantly in this position. You're very, very rarely in this position. And when you are in that position, it feels like you're going to fall. So you don't hang out there. That's like worst case scenario. So you go more between handstand and underbalance, or sorry, standing and underbalance on your feet majority of the time. And look how long your feet are compared to your hands. So I wouldn't really worry about that. We need to understand a little bit of like how to do the overbalance and push through the fingers. So training it to get an understanding of that is really important when we start to go that direction. But it is really about learning how to handstand in the middle, and the underbalance is going to give you your real control in a handstand. I mean, how to do a handstand at least for 25 to 30 seconds. I've got lots of videos on it. I've done one about a month ago that goes into a lot of detail on how to balance a handstand. I recommend you watch that one, but basically it's just learning how to control the overbalance and the underbalance and getting very good at it. And we do that through back to wall and chest to wall, and fill that gap. So think of the gap being from the handstand to the overbalance. So I do this. That's the overbalance. I want to get very good at that. So I'm using my fingers to pull from the wall and making the body tall. And then I get very good at doing this way around, controlling the underbalance using the shoulders to handstand. So I get very good at this, be able to hold in this position here. I practice those two things over and over and over again for the next 6 months. And then you get a 20 to 30 second handstand. Now, it might take someone 2 weeks. It might take someone 2 years. But basically, they're the drills. But watch that video. If you look back on my videos, you'll find the hand balance one. I'll just type in Paul Twyman handstand balance, and that will come up, and it'll make a lot of sense. But it's very simplistic handstand balance training, but it's just very repetitive and making sure you're refining those 2 or 3 drills over and over again. Hello from Greece. I just wanted to thank you because of you. Unlocked ring muscle up and almost a handstand press. Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic. They're great skills. And again, like someone else said they got a press earlier because of my videos. It's you putting in the hard work. My bit's nice and easy, just putting out the drills. But fantastic work. That means you've been training consistently. Handstand press is a big one, and the ring muscle up is another big one. So congratulations. How much core compression strength will help in overbalance? I'd say none. I wouldn't even think about core or compression when doing handstands. I don't even think about compression when doing press handstand. People think about training specifically for compression, in a press handstand. I don't believe there's any compression in a press handstand. It's more about making a strong, stable base and leaning into that base and then extending. Compression is bringing something together. So in the overbalance, like if you think always put it back in terms of handstand balance to what's happening on your feet when you're standing. When you lean forwards onto your toes towards overbalance on your feet, you don't think that there's core compression. There just needs to be connection between the base and the top. So there's some connection between the hands and the head, not the hands and the head, the feet and the head in a standing position, and a handstand compression, connection between the hands and the feet. So when you lean forwards, the body stays as one, and then you come back again. Does bend in the back help when overbalancing? Yes, having the ability to move the body around definitely helps. But it is really understanding to keep the body as one segment. It doesn't necessarily have to be dead straight. So being able to bend and move the body does allow you to move. You think again on your feet. If you stay very, very rigid, it's hard to balance. But if you allow your body to move around, it's much easier as long as you keep some connection. But if you're moving around with no connection, it's just like a crazy flopping about all over the place, then you're just going to fall over. Hey, Paul, managed to catch you while you're still alive this time. Yes, awesome. Hope you're well. Thank you for your support, buddy. And hello to Romania. What time is it in Romania? It's now, what time is it here? 12:42 p.m. on Friday. Does the dragon flag help with handstands? Yeah, I'm sure it does. Like training towards the dragon flag does help to make the body one segment. It's a cool skill, but I never put it in a handstand program. It's too specific type of skill that is super cool, but doesn't really carry over to anything. If you make your planche and your front lever, you do 360 pulls to a good level, you'll just be able to do a dragon flag. Like I've never trained dragon flags, but I can do a full dragon flag, but I've never trained it. So it's one of those skills where I think you get it for free. I think back lever is the same. Like I don't think you need to train back lever if you do the other movements. If you're doing planche training and you're doing skin the cats and front lever and stuff like that, you'll get a back lever for free. So I think dragon flag is one of those. However, dragon flag back levers are really cool skills. So if you want to refine them and make them cool, or that's your goal, then working towards them will be beneficial, and I'm sure that will carry over to other skills. Do you have any tips for forearm splints when doing planche training on powerlets? I would just try and mix it up. Obviously, mobility will help. I would make sure that the powerlets that you're using are movable, so you can change the position. So if I've got, if you use fixed bars, so if these are connected, see these aren't connected. If these were connected and they're fixed, that's going to make me have to adapt to the fixed position. So a lot of parallel bars at the parks and stuff will be fixed. So I have to deal with the distance they are apart and the angle. If they're not fixed, I would move them slightly and find a comfortable position for you, and even train different positions depending on what you're doing. So I always prefer some slight external rotation. So I'll turn mine out like that. So I won't have them like that. Definitely won't have them like that. Some parks you'll find they're like this, and I'd always prefer to have them that way because I find it more comfortable. So I would do that. Upper body mobility definitely makes a difference. Hydration, nutrition, that type of thing is going to help with that type of thing. Recovery, just watch your intensity on how you're doing it, and making sure you're not dumping into the position. So you don't want to be like sagging into positions. It should always be like you're pushing away as hard as you can within reason. So I'm pushing away now, but I can hold a conversation. I can push away like this, and now I can hold a conversation. That's too much, but pushing away enough so you're not collapsing in the position, being too soft. That will help as well. Hanging, doing the opposite movements. Hard to say without assessing everything else. Cool, thanks. My pleasure. Does the thickness of some powerlets make a difference if you have smaller hands trying to control the handstand? Yeah, 100%. I've been working towards 90-degree handstand push-up on the single bar, if you've been watching my videos. And I've got that, I don't know if you can see it. There's this fat bar that I've been using for that. And a lot of P bars at the parks and stuff are really fat. So if you look at the thickness difference between this one and this one, that's quite a difference. I can control, like for planche, I'm much stronger on this one, and because that's much thinner than this. I haven't got massive hands, so I much prefer this, and I also prefer wood than metal. But when I'm doing my when I'm balancing on the single bar with my thumbs over, like I'm doing for the 90-degree push-ups, this is probably easier because it's a bigger surface area. So it's pros and cons in terms of how, what you find works. But I really prefer this one, but I'm not a big fan of narrower than that. So thinner than that hurts my hands. So it's really sort of finding what works best for you. Play with different ones, play with different material, and then once you find one you like, stick with that. But just bear in mind, if you always use the same one, if you go and train somewhere else, you'll be a bit restricted by whatever else you're using. What do you think about doing toes to bar negatives to unlock the full movement? Yeah, toes to bar negatives are really good. Moving nice and slow, going into a tuck position, so rolling down through the movement, more like a planche lower, and sort of winding yourself out of it. That works really well. Skin the cat, because you can play with that toes to bar type movement at the start when you keep your torso still and bring your legs up slowly and then roll up through the spine. That's really good. Active to passive hangs, arch and scat pulls. Yeah, and also just making sure that you have good control with like a V-sit, not a V-sit, like on the edge of something. Also, females will find those movements much harder because they have a bigger anterior tilt in their pelvis. So doing ones like, those and bringing the legs up, that type of thing, really good for working towards toes to bar. Holding on to something and doing like a reverse crunch type movement to understand how to use the posterior tilt of the pelvis. So holding on to something and doing those slow, this type of movement, trying to get good at doing that, lifting like a reverse crunch, lifting the butt up off the floor. That's really important because you don't want to be in an arch position when you try and do toes to bar. If my low back's arching, I can't lift my feet up. But if I push my low back in, I can easily get my toes up. So again, it depends a little bit on the individual. What do you think about doing? Oh, I've done that one. How to one-hand handstand flag? So if you want to work on your flags for one-arm handstand, if you already have a one-arm handstand, it's very different. I would just work on side bending by itself. So nice and easy straddle to start with. So I'm going to be limited by the wall in that direction, but just coming down as far as you can, making sure you're pushing the right shoulder, elbow in. And then obviously the same on that side. Bending the leg makes it nice as well to get into that side flag. And then if you already have a one-arm handstand, by doing that, going up onto fingertips, holding on to something. So you have a post or something there, holding on, but making sure this shoulder elbow stays in as you do your one arm. But also if you have a one arm, is working real deep position and then pushing that elbow and hand in. And just really focus on keeping this in and bringing the foot down as low as possible. Ankle weights, there's a few different variations you can play with it. Were you involved in gymnastics when you were young? When I was really young, I'd done a little bit of gymnastics, but nothing major. And then I learned to handstand. I basically had like an 8 to 10 second handstand when I started. I think 11 seconds was my best handstand I could hold at 37 when I started training this. So no real gymnastics. When you get the interest in calisthenics? Hi from India. So I really started. So 37. I'm now 48. So 11 years ago, I've been doing it daily since then. And because I was already a personal trainer, I started coaching it very early on. So I've been coaching and training it myself for like 11 years now. Another question for the one-arm handstand. How much are you bending the arm to keep balance? Should I be focusing on more on locking the arm and adjusting my shoulder and body balance. Yeah, look, there's a little bit of elbow bend. Is very, very little. It's more thinking about, to start with, just keeping the shoulder and elbow in towards the midline. So really focusing on that, this movement. So this in on there. So I'm taking my legs down to the side, but I'm pushing my elbow in towards the midline there. And my forearm and hand is moving. So I'm moving around a little bit, but I'm not really bending the elbow. You'll see some people will save bending the elbow, and then the head moves around more and it looks like the arm's bending, but you never really think about the arm bending. So all those things will happen naturally through the hundreds and thousands of repetitions of just holding that position with fingertip. How much should my head go forward when doing handstand push-ups? You just want to create a triangle. So I would just practice your pike push-ups to a position that feels comfortable with your forehead coming forwards with the hands to create a triangle. It's slightly different for everyone. It does depend on how far the hips and the legs go backwards. So the more inclined the position, the more your head and shoulders go forward. So if this is my hands and that's my head, if I'm more of an upright position in my handstand push-up, that's where the position will be. But if my feet are down more, my head comes forwards more. So it will adjust for everyone, but just make sure that it is coming forwards a touch. And I prefer touching forehead to the floor than nose. You'll see a lot of people will do nose to the floor. I don't like that. It tends to extend the body and makes it flatter. I prefer forehead just touching because it keeps the body a bit more upright, and you can use overbalance to help you and stops the scooping, the arching so much. Hey, Paul Connolly, regards and good morning from Germany. Hey, buddy, I've got a few online clients in Germany. What are the minimum strength and flexibility requirements for a straddle press handstand? You can pinch from each side of that. So you can do like a straddle press handstand with very limited flexibility. You should see my first press. So I can press, look, I'm not really using flexibility, but I'm doing a straddle-ish press there, just using strength. Or you can go very flexible and have hardly any strength. I mean, you got to have some conditioning, but you don't have to be naturally that strong and stack everything really nicely. But that's why one of the straddle press is a cool movement, because you can pinch from either side and work to your strengths and then work on your weaknesses at the same time. And then the straddle press will just get easier and easier. How can someone practice a close chest to wall with powerlets? Like 1.5 hand space width from the wall. Should I learn to cartwheel into the position currently going headstand press up to position? If you wanted to, I would either walk in with your hands. You just got to make sure they don't slip. These ones are really good because they're a little bit longer. But if I'm going to go into a chest to wall position there, I would put them into position, and I would probably cartwheel up like that into the position and then come back down. That's the way I would do it. But you can walk in with them as long as they don't slip on the floor, or walk onto them, go up to your chest or handstand and then step onto them. It is very much, it's your setup that you need to pay attention to, because like I demonstrate that, but I've got a clean wall that's nice and long. Some people don't have that much space if they're training in their house or something, or in a gym that's full of machines. So you might have to walk up and into the position. So it's very dependent on what your personal setup is. Hey, Paul, 2 questions. Are you watching the rugby championship? No. I don't watch that much sport, actually. Any tips for bridging the gap between tuck planche and advanced tuck planche? Banded dynamics, perhaps. Yeah, look, bands can help in general to fill the gap. The risk is when you're using a band on any of the planche positions, but specifically when you're starting to open your body out, is that you start to hang off the band too much because your hip goes too far away from your hands and your shoulders, and then you hang off the band because the band is over your hips. So try and keep the band on top of the head and shoulders, so it pulls you back up in that direction. So it encourages you to planche more. And the other big one with the tuck planche to advanced tuck is think that there's the distance is massive. So if I go from a tight tuck position like this, so if I'm planching there, if I want to go to advanced tuck, look how far it is. So there's a big distance to move. So think that if my tuck planche is there, I might go to there, and then I'll go to there, and that might take weeks and weeks to go all the way to there. But like, say week 1 would be there, week 3 would be there, week 6 would be there, week 8 would be there. And the other thing to be careful of is that you don't do this. You don't move your legs out as well. So if I move my feet out, it's increasing the lever arm that way, as well as taking the knees away from the chest. So think very slow movements out. And that's the same as if you're using the band or not using the band. I normally like to do a combination of band and non-band work. So you're doing the best of both. I wouldn't just use bands. Thanks, Paul. Cheers from Seattle. My pleasure. Handstand question, Paul. My wrists are injured, not from handstand training. Do you think you can make a small series on how to learn heel and toe pulls using pallets? I have a video on it. If you just search my channel for parallel bar handstands, I've got a specific video on how to balance on it. You're basically doing the same thing, heel pulls and toe pulls, but just with your hands on the bars. But yeah, I've got a specific video on it already. Just send me a message if you can't find it. Thank you. Thanks for clearing my doubt about the gymnastics. Bye-bye. What is the perfect entry for straddle planche? That's a tricky one. Straddle planche is an interesting one to get in and out of. Straddle L-sit works really nice because you like whip the legs around into it. You can go from like a standing position into it and then just lift the legs up. So like a more of a straddle good morning position. So your weight is back in that position and then you come forwards into it like there and then lift the feet up. That can work really well. I'd play with different ones and just see what works best for you. I've lost where I am. How can I fix my banana during 90-degree handstand push-ups, and how can I think about the press on ground? What I would do is 90-degree handstand push-ups. I would, what was I going to say? I would use elevation, so raise the hands up and practice going from a strict bent arm planche position up to a shoulder stand, trying to keep your body without banana in. So go to there. This is the really hard way of training it, but it's a good way of doing it. So I think bent arm planche through to 90-degree. No, sorry, bent arm planche through to deficit handstand push-up. Then your deficit handstand push-up up to your handstand. So handstand, deficit handstand push-up, bent arm planche. So you're basically slowing down the 90-degree handstand push-up, but do it elevated so your hands are up. I've got a couple of videos on it. If you just search 90-degree handstand push-ups on my channel, and then you slowly decrease the clearance underneath your hands because it's much harder to get into that position. But pull up from a bent arm. So it's like you're doing a dead press, but your hands are raised up so you can take your head and shoulders down. And then I do use your concentric, allow it to banana a little bit, but then with your eccentric, make it as strict as possible on the way down and through. Paul, any future plans for traveling handstand workshop, assuming the travel is in line with your personal life? Yes, definitely. I'll be going to the UK probably next year, and I will do workshops again there. Yes, whenever I travel, I do get requests to go places to do workshops, but it's just tricky with the family and stuff. And it's hard to make that much money on it as well, because once you pay for your travel and stuff, you don't actually make that much money with workshops, and obviously you can't do your normal work. Now majority of my work is online coaching now, or like 99% of my work is online coaching. It is a little bit easier to work while I travel. but yeah, just with the family and stuff. But whenever I do travel, I will offer workshops. Like I said, at the moment, the only plan is UK next year. Thank you. You're a legend, Paul. Thank you, buddy. I'm currently doing tuck planche for 4 by 14 seconds. And your voice of slowly opening the hips and keeping the band above the head is great. Is the V planche useful? What do you mean by V planche? Not sure what the V planche is. Last message for me. If you ever travel to Cape Town one day, it'd be great to work out together. Thanks for answering again. Have a great day. Yes, definitely. Whenever I go anywhere, I always do a shout out, let people know. As you know, I'm like, if you follow me on Instagram, I put out a lot of content on there and always let people know my travel plans. Do banana handstand relies more on finger strength than straight line handstand? No, because normally with a banana handstand, you're still arching backwards towards underbalance and the feet are just over the top. The banana handstand just allows you to have your head and shoulders looking down. So if I'm in this position, see my head and shoulders are facing down, but my feet are over, and my stomach and my hips are pointing out towards underbalance. So I'm still actually in underbalance, but it's just like my head and shoulders and my feet are sticking towards overbalance. Weird question, exercises for bridle carry. I'm not sure what you mean in terms of exercises for that. How difficult you think bent arm planche is? Bent arm planche is much easier than straight arm planche. For most people, it's more about balance, getting enough weight in front and enough weight back. P-bar bent arm planche is much easier because you can externally rotate the hands. That brings the elbows into the side. Guys, I'm going to have to disappear. I've just noticed the time. I had to be off at 1 o'clock. V planche is when you extremely straddle where it reduces. Oh, okay, yeah. No, I think that's very good, and that's more or less what my planche is. I close my hip, so I call that a closed hip planche. And I think it's a good in-between movement. The issue is it's a bit like closing the hip in a handstand, that the hip flexors can get very ingrained in the movement and it's hard to get rid of it. But I would go with a slight closed hip straddle planche when learning it, because going from a advanced tuck or a frog position out to a tuck, out to a straddle is such a massive jump in progressions. So having something in between is really good, and that's where that V planche can come in. So I would definitely use it. Tips for bent arm press. I've got 2 or 3 videos on bent arm press, so have a search. Guys, I am going to have to disappear now. Keep commenting on this video or send me a message if you need any other help, and I'll make more videos. Video requests are always appreciated. I like to put out a lot of content, and coming up with new ideas and things that you guys want to see is very useful. So let me know if you want to support the channel, subscribe, thumbs up, watch my videos. Obviously, I've got my app and all that sort of thing, and offer online coaching if that's what you're looking for. And I will speak to you soon. Thanks, guys.